Photography had hardly been born. The world was still marveling at its ability to capture a faithful image of reality, and a few photographers were already commandeering it for other purposes, to tell stories, to create fictions. A boat carries the dying King Arthur over a rough sea made of fabric, like a stage prop that is touched up with paint. These staged photographs were made by the British photographer Julia Cameron in 1874. Only the moon, which is not painted but scratched instead into the negative, proves that it is indeed a photograph. Simpler and undoubtedly more effective. A self-portrait by the photographer Bayard, who is pretending to be a drowned man. This scene is staged in a different way. The body we see here is Bayard's real body. The fiction comes from the ambiguity of the image. It is the caption on the back that turns a man whose eyes are simply closed into a dead man. One century later, another photographer, inspired by the extraordinary possibilities of fiction, incorporates both theatricality and ambiguity into a single image. His name is Eugene Mityard. He's an optician by profession. In this picture, he's posing with his wife in front of their car, an ordinary scene in the southern United States during the 1960s. However, the Halloween masks worn by the couple reveal the primitive violence that lurks beneath appearances, an inner reality that photography alone cannot show. What is striking is the simplicity with which these scenes are set up. An old mask on a young body is all it takes to create an innocent monster. A mask worn the wrong way, and the back is mistaken for the front. The scenes composed by Mityard and other photographers in the 1960s seek less to tell a story than to depict ghosts and to blur the idea of reality itself. At the same time, American painters were going in the opposite direction, seeking to eliminate all subjectivity and to paint works that were more objective than the most objective photograph. At the crossroads of these two transgressive movements, a portrait of Andy Warhol, the hyperrealist, derealized in 3 phases by the photographer Duane Michels. To the conventional aspects of staged images, Michels adds duration, narrative time, the notion of sequence. Chance meeting, a simple street scene. A narrative is created by breaking up the time sequence, as in a photo-romance novel. We observe this failed meeting, and although we will never know what it was all about, the constant gap or lag between the two figures creates a sense of melancholy and unease. The series Things Are Queer begins in an ordinary bathroom. With the next picture, however, we are thrust into a world where nothing is certain anymore. Is the man too big or the bathroom too small? Is this reality or just a tiny image in a book being read by an anonymous person on a walk, who is in turn nothing more than a picture above the wash basin in the same bathroom? The last picture is the same as the first. The series becomes a closed circle, trapping the viewer in a story that keeps going round and round. A sequence of still images engenders an imaginary world, the world of inner vision, into which Andy Warhol seems to withdraw in another portrait by Duane Michels, hiding behind his hands, rejecting a photographic tradition that venerates the eyes. The American photographer McAdams pares the sequence down to 2 images in his Mysteries series, which dates from the 1970s. The photographs, infused with a B-movie atmosphere, show the beginning and the end, before and after. In between the two, what is missing is the present, the famous decisive instant that is so precious to realist photographers. That's what Adams calls the narrative void. It is up to the viewer to interpret the clues, to imagine how the hitchhiker ended up in the trunk, to calculate how much time has gone by the pile of leaves, and to speculate on the ill omen portended by the black bird. Mystery of 2 triangles. A corpse on the beach. A man with a strange tattoo. 2 triangles like the triangles drawn around the dead man. A couple that is oblivious to everything, in danger perhaps. Smoke and condensation. Through the misted window, we can make out the body of a dead girl. The hand holding the glass is the same as the hand closing the car door. In another series dating from the late 1990s, McAdams, working this time in color, incorporates the entire mystery into a single picture. A designer object, chosen for its chrome surface, becomes a mirror that distorts as it reflects situations whose violence contrasts with the cold perfection of the metallic exterior. A disturbing postmodern version of the magic mirrors and fairy tales. The main reference for these photographers who were growing up during the golden age of Hollywood is American movies with their fantasies and their cliches. Pictures such as these, for example, displayed at the entrances to local cinemas called stills. Photographs taken on the set that seek to condense all of the drama of the film into a single image. In 1976, Cindy Sherman reinvented the genre by posing in front of the camera herself in the role of all kinds of imaginary heroines of non-existent films. She is both playing with the camera as well as using it to deconstruct the female image in American movies. Apprehensive women with frightened looks who are prey. These pictures are not only parodies, they succeed in creating a feeling of tension that is typical of film, in which one never knows where the next blow will come from. Just as in a movie, these women are looking at something off camera, outside of the frame, where the cause of their uneasiness is concealed, and which makes it even more terrifying because it is unseen. In the 80s, Cindy Sherman pursued the same idea, posing this time, however, in color. The internalized fear implicit in the black and white photographs gives way to crude images, a physical expression of horror and death. In 1993, the Canadian photographer Jeff Wall accomplished a real feat. He captured the effects of a gust of wind in a single image. The tree, the people, the papers from the folders symbolizing human activity, and the traveler's hat all come together quite magically to create the feeling of a gust of wind blowing everything away. This picture is, of course, unrealistic. It was entirely pre-scripted and then set up and photographed bit by bit. Jeff Wall spent more than a year taking the 100 or so pictures he needed, which were then assembled by computer to create the illusion. But this photograph is a reconstruction in more than one way. It is also based on a print by the Japanese painter Hokusai. The destroyed room. It is said that the clothing used by Jeff Wall in this carefully arranged scene of sabotage belonged to his wife, who had just left him. Beyond the anecdotal, however, this photograph is also associated with a famous masterpiece, The Death of Sardanapalus by Delacroix, a painting that caused a scandal when it was first exhibited. Leaping over an entire period in art history, Jeff Wall proposes a cubist reinterpretation of the painting. Objects and structures are substituted for Sardanapalus and his naked slaves, including the statuette of a dancer who represents the head of the Assyrian tyrant, the only survivor of this catastrophe. The connection with painting is emphasized even in the way the picture is displayed. A large format transparency is exhibited in a light box like an advertising billboard, in order, says Jeff Wall, to give the photograph a radiance that the painting has lost. A bar at the Folies Bergère by Manet provides Jeff Wall with an opportunity to explore the position of the photographer. The party is over. The Folies Bergère setting is replaced by the cafeteria at the Canadian University where he works. And it is now the camera that occupies the central position in the picture. If we look at it very closely, we will see that the brand name reads backwards. The image is reversed. In fact, everything that we see is reflected in a mirror. In his painting, Manet uses the mirror to create a double image, showing the barmaid from behind speaking to a customer, as well as from the front facing us, as if we were in the customer's place. In the painting, however, the barmaid really is standing in front of the mirror, while in Jeff Wall's photograph, nothing is real. Everything is a reflection. There is no face-to-face interaction. The structure of the image isolates the figures. Jeff Wall himself as the photographer, and his model, each imprisoned in their own world. The only connection is via the camera. But Jeff Wall is also capable of farce. In his gigantic composition, The Vampire's Picnic, a bloody family reunion at night becomes an allegory, he says, of the city encroaching on the countryside. Conceptual thinking gives way to burlesque. Arranged like a movie set with 20 or so extras posing for the camera and horror film specialists brought in as consultants, the image does not seek to be beautiful or credible. It is a parody of debauchery, an extravaganza of cliches and effects whose very excess expresses a disenchanted vision of the world we live in. A different night, more sedate in appearance. A comet lights up a party for children dressed in clothes from another period. In this photograph by Bernard Faucon, the only thing that is real is the setting. The comet is a firework rocket, and the figures are shop window mannequins, all twins, who are as lifeless as the 4 chairs that the photographer has carefully placed throughout the scene in order to structure the image. Mannequins, dolls, and automatons fascinated the Romantics, and then the Surrealists, because they seemed to be on the border between animate and inanimate beings. It is this ambiguity that serves as the basis for Bernard Faucon's series entitled Summer Vacation, in which he recreates scenes from his childhood. First Communion. The many mannequins that surround the only live figure create a feeling of unreality and seem to give substance to the reconstructed memory. In this photograph from the same series, the mannequins are the guardians of sleep and memory, delineating around the sleeping boy the ideal form of a square that corresponds to the square format of the photograph. Bernard Faucon considered this to be the perfect format for staged images because it both contains and delimits the world. Another square in another photograph entitled The Flying Child. Despite their blatant artificiality, Bernard Faucon's compositions are made the old-fashioned way without any digital manipulation. A string is holding up the child who is flying, and the other young mannequins, who are barely visible in the distance, are really standing in the field. A different relationship to childhood is found in the World War II battles that are reconstructed by David Leventhal. Here, the photographer's vision is like that of a child who's playing and blotting out the reality around him in order to create an unidentifiable space in which the only sense of scale comes from the little soldiers. Scenes designed like big productions on a tabletop. The props are very carefully prepared. Leventhal goes as far as to grow real grass on his miniature battlefields. But the real power of these images comes primarily from the way the photographer plays with blurring, graininess, and overexposure in order to convey the feeling of chaos and confusion experienced by soldiers in combat, and the imperfection of photographs taken on the fly, under pressure. For Leventhal, these images are not works in themselves, but material to be used for a story, a fake history book, another fiction, in which his fabricated scenes are combined with real documents, maps, speeches, quotes, drawings. And they seem, curiously enough, to be just as authentic. A most official portrait of Emperor Hirohito taken in 1999, after he had been dead for 10 years. It is part of a series of portraits of famous people by the Japanese photographer Hiroshi Sugimoto. His models, whether dead or alive, all have one thing in common. They have never posed for him. They are, in fact, wax figures from the famous museum Madame Tussauds. Made up, meticulously illuminated, photographed under low light conditions with over 20 minutes of exposure time to enhance their contours and give the illusion of real skin. It is pure trompe-l'œil, a trick played on the viewer that can only be accomplished through the photographic image. But it is also a reflection of the images that surround us nowadays. The truth is, if these wax figures can so easily deceive us, it is because the poses and expressions of their flesh and blood models are just as fake. A staircase. The top of an escalator. An ivy-covered facade. Perfectly realistic settings, made of cardboard. Illusions like Sugimoto's subjects. In his pictures, the German photographer Thomas Demand literally takes up the idea that our reality is a construction, an artifact, no more authentic or more artificial than these paper leaves pasted one by one onto a facade whose windows do not open onto anything. This facade is an exact copy of the facade of a tavern where a particularly sordid crime was committed. But Demand makes no mention of this fact. Similarly, nothing tells us that in this other picture we are looking at a faithful reproduction of the room where Leni Riefenstahl, the Nazi filmmaker, kept her archives. The photographer's eye must remain completely neutral. The lighting is subtle, seeking to bring out every little detail in the decor. A visual document, as cold as the imaginary places themselves, which are all the more sinister in their emptiness. What is most astounding, however, is that these are not miniature mock-ups, but actual props constructed on a scale of 1:1 over a period of several weeks, and then destroyed once they have been photographed. Here it is the structure of the scene itself that gives the image its power. Drafting room. It would be hard to imagine a photographic document more objective than this, except that here the reality that is in front of the camera is a simulacrum. Stasi headquarters after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Reconstructed, photographed, destroyed like all the others. This image is simply called office. Like the scattered papers, a photograph is a blank page. On it, each of us is entitled to write our own story. That is what all of these staged images have in common. They play with photography's codes of objectivity, with the notions of precision, the neutral point of view, in order to open up imaginary spaces in reality in which each of us is free to follow the wind, or our own imagination.